Have you ever given everything you are, your time, your energy, your health, even your youth, to your family, only to reach a moment in life where they look at you and say you've become too much, that your presence is no longer needed? That was the weight pressing on my heart the night I turned 80, a night meant to honor my years, but instead it exposed just how fragile family loyalty can become when selfishness takes hold. My name is Victoria Blackwood. For 8 decades, I carried burdens most people would have crumbled under. I buried my husband 5 years ago. I raised a son who, as a boy, clung to me in thunderstorms and cried when fevers shook his small frame. I worked tirelessly to build a business empire that grew from a single shipping container into a fortune that supported not only my household but generations to come. I thought the love I poured into my family would always be returned in equal measure. But on my 80th birthday, I learned the most painful truth of all. Love can be forgotten when greed and convenience take its place. The night had started with all the symbols of celebration. Candles glowing against fine china, the long dining table stretched across my Napa Valley estate, the scent of prime rib and roasted vegetables filling the air. It should have been a memory wrapped in joy. Yet as I sat at the head of that table, surrounded by the very people I had sacrificed for, I felt a loneliness heavier than I had known in decades. My grandchildren were glued to their phones. My daughter-in-law scrolled without looking up, and my son David glanced at his watch as though each second spent in my presence was time wasted. Still I smiled. Still I hoped. For surely, I told myself, when they saw the gifts I had chosen with such care, or tasted the cake baked in my own kitchen, their faces would soften, their voices would fill with gratitude. Surely the years of sacrifice had not been erased so easily. But the words that soon left David's lips told me otherwise. With a cold smile, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mom, you've had enough of our time. We won't be back again." Those words fell like a stone into the center of my chest. Silence swept the room. My grandchildren looked up from their devices at last, sensing the weight of what had been said. My daughter-in-law nodded without protest, as if those words were hers too. At that moment, I realized something I had refused to see for years, that the people I loved most had come to see me not as a mother or grandmother, but as an inconvenience standing between them and their future inheritance. But let me tell you something, I did not reach 80 years old by being weak. I did not build a fortune by being blind. And I was not about to let the child I had carried in my womb treat me like an old coat to be hung up and forgotten. That night, in the same breath that my son dismissed me, I made a decision that would shock him to his core. He thought he was walking away from me. He didn't realize he was also walking away from every dollar, every property, every investment, and every ounce of security he had assumed would one day be his. And so, my dear viewers, as I share with you the story of that unforgettable night and everything that followed, I want to pause here, not for myself, but for you. Because betrayal is not only my story, it is the story of many who gave their lives to family only to be treated as though they no longer mattered. Let me lift you in prayer, from one grandmother's heart to yours. May your old age never be shadowed by loneliness, but filled with the laughter of children and grandchildren who honor you. May your health be strong, your mind clear, and your days long. May your table never be empty of love. If you carry pain right now, aches in your body, struggles in your finances, or wounds from those you trusted, may peace settle over you like a gentle hand of comfort. And may the years ahead of you be marked not by rejection, but by respect and dignity. Amen. Now, as you listen to my story, I want to ask something of you. Join this community of listeners who value lessons hidden in life's hardest trials. Tap that subscribe button so you don't miss any of these tales of betrayal, courage, and redemption. And in the comments below, tell me where you are watching from. I want to know the places around the world where hearts are gathered to hear these stories. Because tonight, what happened on my 80th birthday is not just my story. It is a warning, a lesson, and most importantly, a reminder. Never underestimate the strength of a woman who has already survived a lifetime of storms. The crystal chandelier above my dining table glimmered like a crown, throwing golden light across polished silverware and fine china. The mahogany table stretched long, dressed with linen so white it could blind the eye. Fresh roses from my garden sat in tall vases, their fragrance mingling with the aroma of roasted vegetables and prime rib. My housekeeper, Maria, had spent days preparing the feast, her hands working with love and loyalty my family no longer seemed capable of offering. I looked at the table and thought, this is my legacy. This house, this land, this vineyard. Every meal set before them tonight. It all came from years of my sweat and my husband Robert's determination. Yet, as the clock struck 7 and my guests arrived, I realized that no matter how fine the setting, you cannot decorate over indifference. My daughter-in-law Rachel entered first, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. Her lips formed a smile, but her eyes were glued to the glowing screen in her hand. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said lightly, already scrolling through messages, her voice carrying the weight of duty rather than affection. Behind her came David, my only son. At 45, he carried himself like a man who believed the world owed him more than it ever gave. His suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled from the drive-up from San Francisco. He kissed my cheek quickly, already distracted, already somewhere else in his mind. Then came Madison and Tyler, my teenage grandchildren. Their faces lit not by joy but by the blue glare of their phones. They sat at the table without glancing at the roses, the china, or the gifts I had wrapped with trembling hands and careful thought. Rare books for Madison, a vintage necklace for Rachel, and my late husband's watch for David. None of it was noticed. "Grandma, this house is so old," Madison said without looking up. "Why don't you just move to one of those senior places? They have, like, activities and stuff." I swallowed the tightness in my chest. To her, my home was not history. It was clutter. Every board and stone Robert and I had built together had become, in her eyes, outdated walls holding back her convenience. "Sweetheart," I replied softly, "this house is more than wood and stone. Your grandfather and I bought this land when it was nothing but scrub. We built this with our own vision." "Yeah, but that was forever ago," Tyler muttered, his thumbs busy across his phone screen. His father didn't correct him. David only stared out of the window, sighing like a man whose patience was being drained with every passing minute. The dinner began with muted conversation. Rachel complained about traffic. The children groaned about slow Wi-Fi. David checked his watch, then his phone, then his watch again. No one asked about the years I had survived since Robert's death. No one spoke about the business I had built, or the sacrifices I had made to cover David's failed ventures. The food was eaten, but unappreciated. The laughter I had prayed for never arrived. By the time Maria carried in the chocolate cake, 3 layers baked from a recipe Robert loved, the air around the table was already heavy with impatience. I sat waiting, silently hoping that someone would raise a glass, someone would offer words of gratitude. But instead, my son cleared his throat, his voice calm and steady, as if preparing for a business negotiation. "Mom, we need to talk about some practical things." I straightened in my chair. "Practical things?" David glanced at Rachel, who leaned forward, her tone suddenly sharpened with interest. "What David means is, maybe it's time to simplify. You know, something smaller. Somewhere with medical care nearby." Her words landed on me like stones. To her, I was not a woman who had once led international trade deals, who could still balance accounts better than bankers. I was a burden waiting to be tucked away in a corner until life decided I was no longer useful. "I appreciate your concern," I said, steadying my voice. "But I manage just fine. Maria helps with the heavier chores, the garden keeps me strong, and my book club keeps me sharp." David shook his head, his face tightening. The patience slipped from his features like a mask falling to the ground. What came next were words I will never forget. "Mom, let's be realistic. You've had enough of our time. We've been patient, we've been respectful, but this can't go on forever. We won't be back again after tonight." The room froze. Even Madison and Tyler lifted their heads, startled by the rawness of his statement. Rachel didn't protest. She nodded along, lips pressed tight. My heart felt like it cracked down the middle. This was the boy I once carried against my chest during fevers, the boy I stayed awake with when nightmares haunted him. I had paid his tuition, covered his debts, and helped him through every failure. Yet here he was, dismissing me as though I was little more than a chair gathering dust in the corner. For a long moment, I said nothing. The clock in the hallway ticked, steady as ever, as though mocking the silence. I looked at their faces, David's hardened expression, Rachel's complicit approval, my grandchildren's wide eyes. Then slowly I rose from my seat. My hand did not tremble as I reached for the wineglass before me. I lifted it, letting the stem catch the light of the chandelier, and with a voice calm and steady, I spoke words that would change the course of our family forever. "Sweetheart," I said, meeting David's eyes, "you're out of the inheritance. And my fortune, too." Gasps filled the room. Rachel's jaw fell open. David's face drained of color, then flushed red in an instant. Even the children leaned forward, their phones forgotten. "You heard me," I continued, raising the glass slightly higher. "You want to be done with me? Then consider it mutual." David pushed back his chair so violently it nearly toppled. "Mom, you can't be serious." "Can't I?" I cut in, my voice firm. "For years, I've been old and feeble in your eyes, unable to manage my own affairs. But the moment I tell you that you've lost your claim to my fortune, suddenly I'm not capable of making decisions." The irony stung sharper than the wine I sipped next. For once, they were speechless. "And so I turned to you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have swallowed those cruel words and remained silent? Or would you too have drawn a line that no child, no matter how entitled, should ever cross?" The morning light over Napa Valley carried the kind of golden calm that should have brought comfort, but inside me, the ache from the night before was heavy and raw. I sat at my breakfast nook, coffee steaming in a bone china cup that had outlasted 2 recessions and 47 years of marriage. Beyond the window, the vineyard stretched wide, vines standing like soldiers in perfect rows. Robert and I had planted them together, each stem a reminder of the life we built from nothing. Yet, as I watched the sun spill across the land, my mind circled back to my son's words. "You've had enough of our time. We won't be back again." Maria bustled in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, humming an old Spanish hymn. She had worked for me for 15 years, long enough to know my moods before I spoke them aloud. She glanced at me, her face soft with worry. "Señora Victoria," she said gently, setting down a plate of warm bread. "That boy of yours, he has no respect. His father, God rest his soul, would be ashamed." Her words broke through the silence, and I placed my hand over hers. Maria was more than an employee. She was family in every way David and Rachel had failed to be. "You're right," I said softly. "Robert would never have tolerated such cruelty. But last night taught me something important. I am no longer bound by guilt or by their expectations. I am free. I let the truth settle in my own heart. For years I had convinced myself that keeping peace was worth the sacrifices I made. But what had peace brought me? A table full of silence, gifts ignored, sacrifices forgotten. No, last night was not the end. It was the beginning of something entirely new. Maria poured me another cup of coffee, but my thoughts were already racing far beyond the vineyard. Because while David and Rachel believed I was nothing more than a lonely widow clinging to her house, the reality was far different. They saw only the estate, worth nearly $8 million. They had no idea that my wealth extended far beyond the vineyard gates. They did not know that Blackwood International, the company I had founded from a single shipping container in 1978, still thrived. My empire stretched across continents, artisan rugs from Morocco, textiles from Peru, olive oil from Italy, all flowing into American markets under contracts I had carefully built for decades. Even in retirement, the quarterly dividends alone provided me with millions. Add to that my real estate holdings, my art collection, and offshore accounts established during more favorable tax years, and the figure rose higher than anyone in my family could imagine. $47 million. That was my true net worth. And yet, in my son's eyes, I was an old woman wasting space in a house too large for her. But money was not my only secret. Tucked away in my study, behind Robert's portrait, was a wall safe. Inside rested medical documents that only my doctor and lawyer had ever seen. 18 months ago, I had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The news struck like a storm at first, but I refused to allow it to define me. With medication and strict routines, my condition was stable. My mind was still clear, my judgment sharp. I had chosen not to tell David or Rachel. Not because I feared their pity, but because I knew what they would do with that information. They would twist it, use it as evidence that I could no longer manage my affairs, and take from me the very independence I fought to protect. The irony made me laugh bitterly that morning. While I hid my diagnosis to shield myself, they were already planning to strip away my dignity without knowing a single detail. After Maria left for her daughter's appointment, I unlocked the safe and pulled out another folder, one I had been building for months. Inside were credit reports, financial statements, and documents that painted a far darker picture of David and Rachel's life than I had admitted to myself. David was drowning. $200,000 in debts, credit cards, business loans, even a second mortgage. Rachel was no better. Her taste for casinos was no secret to me anymore. Bank withdrawals revealed late-night trips to slot machines and poker tables. She thought her losses were hidden, but I had seen every dollar drain from their accounts. No wonder they had sat across from me with such cold calculation. They weren't concerned about my health or comfort. They were desperate for relief from their own ruin. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID flashed David's office number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Mother." His voice was carefully measured, the tone of a man trying to mask panic. "About last night, we need to talk." "Do we?" I replied, leaning back in Robert's leather chair. "I thought you made yourself very clear." "I was frustrated," he said quickly. "The kids were restless. Rachel had a headache, the drive was long. I didn't mean what I said." I smiled, though he could not see it. "Which part didn't you mean, David? The part about me having enough of your time? Or the part about not coming back?" There was a pause. "All of it. Of course we want you in our lives. You're our mother, our grandmother. Family is the most important thing." If I had not seen the credit reports, if I had not known about the debts and the casino withdrawals, perhaps I would have believed him. But now I heard the desperation beneath his words. He wasn't seeking reconciliation. He was seeking rescue. "You're right about one thing," I said evenly. "Family is important. But last night you showed me exactly what kind of family you intend to be." "Mom, please. You can't mean to cut us off because of one argument." "One argument." My voice sharpened. "David, this has been building for years. Your silence, your distance, your constant need for money. Last night was not an accident. It was the truth slipping from your mouth. And once the truth is spoken, it cannot be taken back." He tried again, but I ended the call before his excuses could wear me down. That evening, I phoned Patricia Hendricks, my attorney. She had handled my affairs since Robert's death and knew my resolve better than anyone. "Victoria," she said, her tone steady, "I must ask, are you certain you want to make these changes? Cutting David out entirely is a heavy decision." "Patricia," I replied, "if you had a business partner who told you that you had taken enough of their time and they were walking away, what would you do?" "I'd find a new partner." "Exactly. David has declared his choice. Now I'm making mine." For 2 hours, we reviewed documents. Together we began reshaping the future of my estate. No longer would it flow into David's hands by default. New trusts would be built. Charities would be named. Maria and her daughter would be recognized. And my grandchildren, Madison and Tyler, would be cared for in ways that bypassed their parents' reckless control. By the time I ended the call, my plan was in motion. Last night had broken me, but this morning had rebuilt me. Stronger, sharper, freer. My son thought he had dismissed me, but in truth, he had released me from every chain of obligation. And now, at last, I would act, not as a discarded mother, but as the woman who had built an empire and knew how to protect it. 3 weeks after my birthday, I found myself sitting in an office that looked more like a gentleman's club than a place where secrets were traded. Leather chairs lined the walls, oil paintings hung heavy in gilt frames, and the scent of polished wood lingered in the air. The name on the glass door read Morrison and Associates. Harold Morrison, a silver-haired man in his 60s, greeted me with the kind of firm handshake that reminded me why I had trusted him before. Years ago, when I was running my import business, Harold had quietly handled cases of industrial espionage, rooting out competitors who tried to steal what I had built. Now I needed him for something even more personal. "Victoria," he said warmly, "it's been too long. What brings you back to me?" "My son," I replied, my voice steady. "And his wife. I need to know exactly what they've been planning." His brow furrowed, but he said nothing, waiting for me to continue. "They want me gone." They want control of everything I've built. I suspect they're already laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. I need proof. All of it. Harold nodded once, pulled out a leather-bound notebook, and began jotting down details. We'll need 2 weeks for a full investigation. Phone records, financial transactions, social media activity, correspondence. When we're done, you'll know everything. I left his office with the certainty that I had just set a new storm in motion. 10 days later, a thick envelope arrived at my Napa estate. Inside was a report so damning I had to steady myself before reading it through to the end. My worst fears were not only true, they were worse than I had imagined. David and Rachel had been building a case against me for months. They had consulted elder law attorneys. They had reached out to geriatric specialists. They had even contacted a residential facility in Petaluma called Golden Sunset Manor, a place that specialized in long-term care for aging patients with diminished capacity. Harold's team had also uncovered emails between Rachel and her sister Linda in Phoenix. The words chilled me. David thinks she's starting to slip, one email read. She repeats stories sometimes, and she forgot a detail about her book club. If we can get a doctor to confirm early dementia, we'll have power of attorney before she gives the money away. Another email was even more cutting. The house alone is worth at least $8 million. If we wait too long, she'll probably donate it to some charity. You know how old people get with causes. We need to act before she does something crazy. I gripped the pages so tightly my knuckles turned white. They weren't just impatient. They were predators circling, waiting for me to stumble so they could take the kill. But that wasn't all. Harold's team had traced David's consulting work with one of my subsidiary companies. The numbers told the story. Fraudulent expenses, fake invoices, phantom trips. $63,000 siphoned off in carefully measured amounts, spread across 2 years to avoid suspicion. My own son had been stealing from me while plotting to strip me of my freedom. And then came the name that would change everything. Dr. Marcus Webb. His file read like a manual for exploitation. A psychiatrist with a specialty in competency evaluations, Dr. Webb had testified in dozens of cases, always with the same outcome. The elderly patient declared unfit, guardianship handed over to a family member. His services weren't cheap, $50,000 for a comprehensive evaluation and testimony package. But he guaranteed results. Rachel had already paid him a $5,000 deposit. Harold's investigators even recorded a call between Rachel and Dr. Webb. Her voice was brisk, businesslike. She forgets things. She repeats herself. We're worried about her judgment. Can we start the paperwork for an evaluation? Dr. Webb's reply was smooth, rehearsed. Of course. Document the lapses. Get witnesses. The court trusts my word. Once we have the records, guardianship is straightforward. I sat in silence. The report spread across my desk like a map of betrayal. My son. My daughter-in-law. A paid professional willing to sign away my life for a fee. For a long time, I stared at Robert's portrait above the fireplace. His steady eyes seemed to ask the question I had been avoiding. What will you do now? I knew the answer. I would do what I had always done. I would fight. The next week, I arranged my own meeting with Dr. Webb, using a false name. I told him I was concerned about my elderly mother's memory problems. He welcomed me into his office with a sympathetic smile, his walls lined with degrees that gave him an air of respectability. The key, he explained smoothly, is establishing a pattern of poor judgment. Repeated stories, misplaced objects, financial decisions that don't make sense. Courts respond to patterns. And what happens once the court agrees? I asked. Then the family assumes guardianship. You'll have control of her assets, her property, her medical care. It's the safest route to protect her from herself. Even if she disagrees? He smiled. That's the beauty of it. Once the court rules, her opinion doesn't matter. I've testified in dozens of cases. We always win. I thanked him, shook his hand, and left. But as I walked back to my car, my fury burned hotter than the California sun. This man wasn't a doctor. He was a thief with a diploma. And my family was ready to pay him to put me away. That evening, I called Detective Maria Santos of the San Francisco Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, a woman Patricia, my lawyer, had once introduced me to. "Detective," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "I have evidence of a conspiracy. My son, his wife, and a psychiatrist named Marcus Webb are working together to strip me of my rights and seize my estate." She listened carefully as I explained. "Do you have documentation?" "Everything," I replied. "Emails, phone records, financial transactions, even a recording of Dr. Webb promising guaranteed results. And proof that David has stolen from me $63,000 in fraudulent expenses." There was silence on the other end before she spoke again. "Mrs. Blackwood, what you're describing is not just a family dispute. It's a fraud. It's elder abuse. If we can prove this in court, they could all face serious charges." "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Because I will not spend the rest of my life locked away in a facility while my fortune pays for their debts." That night, as I sat on the terrace with the vineyard stretching below me, I felt both the sting of betrayal and the thrill of preparation. They thought I was weak. They thought they could cage me. But they had underestimated the woman who had negotiated with trade partners across 6 continents, who had survived recessions and rivalries, who had built an empire brick by brick. David and Rachel had set a trap for me. What they didn't know was that I had already set one for them. And now, to you listening to my story, I want to ask you, have you ever seen greed destroy a family like this? Have you ever watched people you love turn into strangers over money? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know your stories too. Because what my son failed to understand was this. When you plot against someone who has survived as much as I have, you don't just risk losing their fortune. You risk waking a strength that no court, no fraud, and no betrayal can silence. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 weeks after my birthday. David's voice was strained, his words clipped. "Mom, we need to talk. In person." "Do we?" I asked calmly, sipping my coffee. "There are complications. Not over the phone. Can I come up today?" I glanced at my calendar. It was the very day Detective Santos had told me charges were being filed. Perfect timing. "Of course," I said smoothly. "Come for lunch. I'll have Maria prepare something special." 3 hours later, I watched from my study window as his BMW pulled into the circular driveway. He sat in the car for nearly 5 minutes before stepping out, running a hand through his hair the way he used to as a boy when he'd been caught in a lie. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face pale. Maria opened the door, ushering him in with polite formality. "Your son is here, Senora." "Thank you, Maria. Bring tea to the sitting room." David stepped into the living room, his eyes darting about like a trapped animal. "Mom," he said, forcing a smile. "We have a problem." "Do we?" I asked, settling into Robert's old wingback chair, the one that always made me feel unshakable. He began pacing. "Someone's been digging into my finances, my business records. I got a call from my attorney this morning. The police want to question me about some irregularities." "Irregularities," I repeated, arching a brow. "Is that what you call $63,000 in fraudulent charges?" His head snapped toward me. "How do you?" "Because I am the one who reported you, David. I had you investigated." The words fell heavy in the air. For the first time in years, my son looked at me with genuine fear. "You," he whispered. "Yes, me." I reached for the folder beside me, laying documents across the coffee table one by one. "Let's start with your financial situation, shall we? Credit card debt, $147,000. Second mortgage, $86,000. Business loans, $35,000. Rachel's gambling debts, $42,000. Together, nearly $300,000 in the red." He stared at the pages, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "And then," I continued, placing down the next set of papers, "there's your plan to have me declared incompetent. Emails, phone logs, consultations with Dr. Webb. Do you want to explain why you paid him $5,000 for an evaluation package? Mom, or why did you contacted elder law attorneys to strip me of my rights? Why Rachel discussed putting me in Golden Sunset Manor while you were busy valuing this house with real estate agents?" He collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We thought we were protecting you." I let out a sharp laugh. "Protecting me? By stealing from me? By planning to lock me away so you could auction off my life? By conspiring with a fraudulent psychiatrist who sells testimonies like candy. His silence was an admission. I placed one final document on the table. Dr. Webb's consultation notes from my staged meeting. He told me everything, David. How to fabricate signs of confusion. How to convince the court I was unfit. He's done it dozens of times. But unfortunately for you, this time he chose the wrong old woman. The police have the recordings. The district attorney is preparing charges. David's hands shook as he reached for the papers. You don't understand, Rachel pushed me. Stop. My voice sliced through the air. You were not forced into this. You made choices. You thought I was too weak to notice. Too old to fight back. But you forgot who I am. I stood, moving to the window where the vineyards stretched in perfect lines. I built an international business from nothing. I negotiated with men twice your size and 3 times your ambition. I faced competitors who would rather see me ruined than see me succeed. Did you really think I wouldn't see through you? When I turned back, he was trembling. Please, he whispered. Don't destroy me. I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but please think of the kids. The kids. I echoed, my voice softening only for a moment. Madison and Tyler will be fine. In fact, they'll be better without your reckless shadow looming over them. I reached for the thick envelope resting on my desk and placed it gently on the coffee table. This, David, is my updated will. Signed and notarized yesterday. Would you like to know what you inherit? His eyes clung to mine with desperate hope. $1, I said. He gasped as though struck. What? $1, I repeated firmly. And a letter explaining exactly why that is all you deserve. His face went pale, then red. You can't. I can. And I did. I opened the envelope, drawing out the next pages. The house, your childhood home, will belong to Isabella Gutierrez, Maria's daughter. She has studied viticulture and dreams of starting her own label. This land will finally be used for something more than a symbol of entitlement. Every time you drive past it, you will be reminded of what you lost. David's jaw clenched, fury flashing in his eyes. You're giving our family home to the housekeeper's daughter? Yes, I said coldly. Because her family has been more loyal to me than you ever were. I laid out another document. The bulk of my fortune will go to charities I have supported for years, the Alzheimer's Association, the Northern California Food Bank, and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. People who will actually use the money to build something worthwhile. He slumped lower, the fight draining from him. And your children, I continued, will receive $2 million each through a trust fund. But there are conditions. They must complete college, maintain steady employment for 2 years, and live independently from you and Rachel. If they fail, they receive nothing. The weight of it sank in slowly. His children would become millionaires, but only if they broke free from his influence. You're destroying my family, David whispered. No, I corrected sharply. I'm saving them. Madison and Tyler still have a chance to live meaningful lives. You would have left them waiting for a fortune that was never coming. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. Rachel will leave me. Perhaps. But given her debts to loan sharks, she may not have the luxury of walking away. For a moment, silence filled the room. I gathered the documents into neat stacks, returning them to their folders. You know what the most satisfying part of this is, David? I asked quietly. You did this to yourself. Every single consequence is a result of your choices. I didn't create your debts. I didn't make you steal from me. I didn't force you to plot with Rachel and Dr. Webb. You chose betrayal over loyalty. And now you must live with it. He lifted his face, eyes red. Will I see you again? I paused, truly considering the question. For a fleeting second, I saw not the man before me but the boy who once ran to me during thunderstorms, clutching my arm for safety. But that boy was long gone. That depends, I said at last. If you can prove you've changed. If you can live without expecting anything from me but respect. Then maybe. But until then, you are nothing more than a stranger who shares my name. Maria appeared in the doorway, her timing perfect. Shall I show him out, Senora? Yes, Maria, I replied. David rose slowly, his movements heavy, like a man walking toward his own execution. At the doorway he turned once more, as if hoping for mercy. I gave him none. After his car disappeared down the long driveway, I called Patricia to confirm the confrontation had gone as planned. Then I called Detective Santos to ensure David would cooperate with their investigation. Finally, I dialed Isabella, who burst into tears when I told her about the house. "Senora Victoria," she stammered. "This is too much. I cannot." "You can and you will," I interrupted firmly. "Your mother has been more family to me than my own son. Consider this not just a gift, but an investment in your future." That evening, I sat on the terrace with a glass of wine, watching the vineyard glow in the fading light. The weight on my chest had lifted. For the first time in years, I felt free. David thought he was cutting me out of his life. What he didn't realize was that he had cut himself out of mine. Permanently. The days after David's departure felt like the first breath after years of suffocation. For so long, I had carried the weight of his disapproval, his distance, and finally his betrayal. But now, with the truth out and justice on its way, I felt something unexpected: peace. Each morning, I walked the rows of the vineyard with Maria and Isabella. The vines, heavy with promise, shimmered in the late summer sun. Isabella asked endless questions about cultivation, soil, and harvest timing, and I found joy in sharing knowledge Robert and I had once treasured together. The land, once a burden reminding me of family fractures, had become a place of renewal. One afternoon, while pruning vines, Maria said softly, "You look lighter, Senora, as if years have been lifted from your shoulders." I smiled, wiping dirt from my hands. "That's because I finally stopped carrying people who never wanted to walk beside me. I let go of the illusion that family means loyalty simply by birth." It was true. Bloodlines had betrayed me. But devotion, the kind Maria and Isabella had shown me, had restored my strength. Weeks later, Madison and Tyler came to visit. I hadn't seen them since the birthday dinner, and I worried they might resent me after the changes to my will. Instead, they greeted me with shy smiles and tearful hugs. "Grandma," Madison whispered, clinging tightly. "We didn't know. We had no idea what Dad and Mom were planning." "I know, sweetheart," I said, brushing her hair back. "And that's why I made sure your future is safe. But on one condition, you must build it with your own hands. I will not allow you to repeat your parents' mistakes." Tyler nodded earnestly. "We want that. We want to make you proud." I led them through the vineyard, telling them stories about Robert, how he had planted the first vines with nothing but determination, how he believed that roots mattered most, both in soil and in family. The children listened wide-eyed, as though hearing their grandfather's wisdom for the first time. Later, we sat under the oak tree by the terrace, sharing a simple meal. Madison looked at me thoughtfully. "Grandma, do you ever wish you had just forgiven Dad?" Her question pierced me, but I answered with honesty. "Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, my love. Forgiveness frees the soul, but forgetting hands power back to those who hurt you. I forgive him because I will not carry his burden. But I cannot forget what he tried to do, nor allow him to destroy me again." The truth seemed to settle into their hearts, heavy but necessary. In the quiet of those days, I often reflected on the lessons carved into my journey. Betrayal had nearly broken me, but resilience had rebuilt me. I realized something that should have been clear all along. Family is not defined by last names or shared DNA. Family is Maria bringing me bread when I was too tired to cook. Family is Isabella walking beside me in the vineyard, ready to carry forward a dream. Family is grandchildren who choose integrity over inheritance. And so I said to myself, and now to you, dear listener of my story, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who protects your heart. I wish I could tell you that David came to his senses, that he apologized and found redemption. But life does not always give us neat endings. What I can tell you is this: I am no longer waiting for his approval. I am no longer living in fear of his rejection. My home is full, my heart is steady, and my vineyard thrives. That is victory enough. On evenings when the sun sets over the hills and the vines glow with golden light, I raise my glass in quiet gratitude, not for wealth, not for status, but for freedom, for the ability to choose who stands beside me. My journey has shown me that betrayal can feel like the end, but in truth, it can be the beginning of something greater. It strips away illusions, leaving only what is real. And what is real is stronger than anything forged in lies. Now, I want to speak directly to you. Perhaps you faced something similar: a betrayal from someone you trusted, disappointment from people you thought would stand by you. If so, know this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. Strength does not come from those who hurt us. It comes from what we choose to do afterward. I chose to protect my heart, to protect the legacy I built, and to surround myself with those who truly value me. So I ask you now, what lessons do you take from my story? Do you believe blood is enough to define family? Or do you, like me, believe it is love, loyalty, and protection that matter most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice may be the wisdom someone else needs to hear today. And if my story has touched you, please subscribe to this channel, share it with someone who might need strength, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Together, we build not just a community, but a family of our own, one rooted not in blood, but in care. That night, as Madison and Tyler hugged me goodbye, I whispered to them words I hoped they would carry forever. Do not measure wealth in dollars. Measure it in the lives you touch, the loyalty you keep, and the hearts you protect. As their car disappeared down the driveway, I felt the vineyard behind me, steady and enduring, its roots deep in the earth. Just like me, my story was not just about betrayal. It was about survival, renewal, and the unshakable truth that a real family will never ask you to shrink. They will ask you to rise. And I did. Thank you for watching.